an offensive from Basra towards Baghdad. After a decisive cavalry victory at Kut, the British expedition under the command of General Charles Townshend advanced on Baghdad. But it was defeated just 20 miles from the city by a superior Turkish force. Townshend fell back towards Kut and was besieged there. The thousands of wounded were sent downriver to Basra in a foul hospital ship in which the helpless men lay, their wounds crawling with maggots. By the early summer of 1915, the British operations in the Near and Middle East ground to a halt. It was clear that they had underestimated the Ottoman Empire. For Lieutenant Lawrence in the Cairo intelligence office, these were trying times. In May, he suffered a personal tragedy when his brother, Frank, died while fighting on the Western Front. 4 months later, his brother Will also died after only 1 week of active service with the Royal Flying Corps. In July 1915, Sheikh Hussein approached the British authorities in Cairo once again, seeking support for an Arab insurrection against the Turks. This time, the British agreed and set up the Arab Bureau to coordinate the revolt, and Captain Lawrence was put on its staff. Lawrence became fully involved in military intelligence, undertaking secret missions across the region, including an attempt to bribe the Turkish commander besieging Kut. But the bribe was refused. By April 1916, General Townshend had lost too many men and was forced to surrender. On his return to Cairo in May 1915, Lawrence met up with his old university mentor, the spymaster David Hogarth, who was now in charge of the Arab Bureau. On the 5th of June, Sheikh Ali ibn Hussein fired the first symbolic shot of the Arab revolt, with attacks on the Turkish garrisons at Jeddah and Medina. The Arab revolt had begun, and with it the realization of Lawrence's dreams. He wrote, "All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake in the day to find that it was vanity. For the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dreams with open eyes to make it possible. This I did. I meant to make a new nation." For Lawrence, the time for dreaming was over. In 1916, the focus of the war in the Middle East returned to Palestine, but the Allies were unable to defeat the heavily entrenched Turks. With the outbreak of the Arab revolt, the British High Command in Cairo realized the value of opening a second front against the Turks in the Hejaz region, which would divert Turkish troops from Palestine. Supported by the fire of British gunboats, the Arabs captured the port of Jeddah on the 10th of June. 3 days later, the holy city of Mecca was liberated. But the poorly armed Bedouin tribesmen were routed by the strong Turkish garrison at Medina. Medina was situated at the end of the Hejaz Railway, which was the principal Turkish supply line in the region. Even so, the revolt quickly spread among the Arab tribes determined to expel the Turkish army from Arabia. The horse and camel-mounted nomads, however, suffered heavy losses in their attacks against fortified Turkish positions. With the number of casualties mounting, morale suffered, and several Arab clans ceased to support the revolt. Meanwhile, a strong Turkish garrison of 12,000 men remained in Medina at the end of the Hejaz Railway, where it posed a barrier to any Arab expansion north. Opposing them was an Arab army composed of 3 parts, each under the command of one of Hussein's sons. The eldest, Prince Ali, had about 5,000 men, Prince Abdullah about 4,000 defending Mecca, and Prince Faisal 7,000. But there was much concern in Cairo about the progress of the Arab revolt, and Sir Ronald Stores was dispatched on a fact-finding mission to Jeddah on the 13th of October 1916 to assess the situation and determine what was needed for the revolt to continue. Captain Lawrence went with him as an interpreter and field intelligence officer. One of the priorities was to identify a single military leader for the Arab army to replace the existing inefficient structure of 3 separate forces. Lawrence held talks with each of the sons of the Sharif of Mecca. Neither Ali nor Abdullah impressed him as military men. Lawrence then made his first ever journey on a camel during a 2-day trip to Wadi Safra, deep in the desert, to meet the 3rd son, Prince Faisal. Lawrence later wrote, "I felt at first glance this was the man I had come to Arabia to seek, the leader who would bring the Arab revolt to full glory." In his subsequent report, Lawrence advocated military and financial support for the Arab revolt, but not the deployment of British troops. He understood Arab sensitivities and knew that if British troops were deployed anywhere near the holy city of Mecca, it would be a serious offence. Following the defeats at Gallipoli and Kut, the British High Command was relieved to hear Lawrence's recommendation, as they had no troops to spare. Lawrence was appointed as Faisal's military advisor. His task was to ensure that the course of the Arab revolt coincided with British interests. To Lawrence, this was an opportunity to fulfill his dream of uniting 20 million Arabs as a single nation, and thus foil French hopes of gaining a foothold in the region in Syria. As he wrote at the time, "It's a big game, and at last one worth playing." But the Arab revolt was chronically short of money, so Lawrence became the conduit for British gold to maintain the cohesion of the disparate tribes that made up the Arab army. It also bolstered his own prestige. The Arabs believed only a top person could distribute such generous amounts of gold sovereigns, as well as weapons and ammunition, to fight the Turks. The size of the Arab army fluctuated greatly, with men constantly leaving and returning, depending on the whim of their tribal leaders and the amount of plunder to be enjoyed. But in a few months under Lawrence's guidance, the Arab army grew into a formidable force. The British army trained them on mortars and machine guns, and engineers showed them how to use explosives. Lieutenant Alec Kirkbride, who served with Lawrence, observed the strengths and weaknesses of the Arabs as fighting men.
You could get a terrific charge out of them. If it came off, that was splendid. If it didn't, well, they ran away. That seemed to be the only sensible thing to do. There was no point in staying there and being killed. If they happened to loot anything of value, then their idea was to get it to a place of safety at once, quite regardless of the effect that their absence would have on the battle. On the other hand, were the regulars, who were practically all men who'd served in the Turkish army and who had volunteered to join the Arab cause. And by doing so, of course, they put themselves in danger of being executed as traitors. They, indeed, were the backbone of the whole movement.
Since the Arabs associated the colour khaki with Turkish uniforms, Prince Faisal suggested to Lawrence that he wear Arab clothes so that the troops would recognise him as one of their leaders. With his fluent Arabic, camel-riding prowess and his phenomenal powers of endurance, Lawrence now lived completely as a Bedouin. Lawrence recognised quickly that the strength of the Arab army lay in its ability to wage guerrilla warfare, to use hit-and-run tactics rather than attack Turkish fortified positions. Lawrence wrote, "Most wars were wars of contact. Ours should be a war of detachment. We were to contain the enemy by the silent threat of a vast, unknown desert." On this desert stage were some remarkable characters, like the sheikh of the Arab Hawitat tribe, Auda Abu Tai. Lawrence observed, "We'd heard